Blaine Stevenson picked up his phone on April 7, 2026, 3 days after Lynette Hooker disappeared from the Sea of Abaco, and called a man he considered a close friend. He and his wife Marn had met Brian and Lynette Hooker in late 2023 while anchored near each other in Bradenton, Florida. They had sailed together, they had shared meals, they had become the kind of friends that people who live at sea make, bound by proximity and shared experience on the water. When Lynette disappeared and Brian was still in the Bahamas, still free, still publicly saying his sole focus was finding his wife, the Stevensons called, because that is what people do when someone they care about is in crisis. That call lasted nearly 40 minutes. Blaine recorded it. Brian did not know. CBS News obtained that recording. They verified it. They reported on it with the specificity that comes from having the audio in hand and being able to confirm its authenticity directly. And in those 40 minutes of unguarded conversation, speaking freely to people he trusted, with no attorney present, with no investigators listening, with no awareness that every word was being captured, Brian Hooker chose a specific word to describe the moment his wife of 25 years entered the water on the evening of April 4th, 2026. He did not say she fell. He did not say she slipped. He did not say she went overboard. He said she basically just bounced off the dinghy. This is the verdict room. We examine the evidence, we follow the facts, and at the end of every investigation, we deliver the verdict. If you are new here, subscribe right now and hit that notification bell. Every week we bring you the forensic depth, the investigative analysis, and the documented evidence that tells you what the public record actually shows. If you are already part of this community, hit that like button right now. It helps more people find this investigation. Now let us talk about that word, what it means, what it is not, and why the 40 minutes that Brian Hooker spent speaking freely to people he trusted is now one of the most significant pieces of the documented record in this case. Before the recording, before the word, before any of the analysis, we need to establish who Lynette Hooker is, because everything that follows only matters because she matters. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. She was from Onstead, Michigan, a small town about 70 miles southwest of Detroit, where she had built an ordinary life before she and Brian sold everything and went to sea. She was not someone who stumbled into sailing in later life. Her mother, Darlene Hamlet, told the Associated Press directly that Lynette had been around lakes, boats, sailing, and swimming her entire life. Her daughter Carly told CBS News that her mother was very fit and strong, a good swimmer who could not simply have fallen off a boat by accident. For over a decade, Lynette and Brian documented their life at sea under the name The Sailing Hookers, sea turtles and sunsets, cinnamon rolls baked in a solar oven aboard their sailboat, a vessel they named Soulmate. Two people who had chosen the water over everything else and who shared that choice publicly with anyone who would follow along. Lynette's last Instagram post was dated April 4th, 2026, the same day she disappeared. The caption read, "Not going anywhere for a while." She had no way of knowing. Now let us talk about the recording, and specifically about the context of it, because the context matters as much as the content. Blaine and Marn Stevenson did not set out to document anything investigatively significant. They called a friend because his wife was missing. The call was private. Brian was in the Bahamas, having just been through what he would describe as the worst night of his life. He was speaking to people he trusted, people who had sailed alongside him and Lynette, people who had no reason in his mind to question or analyze what he was telling them. He was not performing for investigators. He was not choosing words carefully for a formal statement. He was not speaking through an attorney. He was talking to friends. Blaine Stevenson confirmed to CNN that he had recorded the call. He published it on YouTube after Brian was taken into custody because, as he told NBC News, Brian was unable to speak for himself while detained, and Stevenson wanted to release Brian's account of the incident as Brian himself had described it. That detail matters forensically. The recording was not obtained through surveillance or deception by investigators. It was a private individual recording a call with the intention of eventually documenting Brian's own account in his own words. What Brian said in those 40 minutes is now part of the public record, verified by CBS News, NBC News, Fox News, and News Nation. multiple major news organizations that independently confirmed both the recording's existence and its content. And in that recording, the word he chose was bounced. Let us examine what that word is and what it is not, because the linguistic specificity here is the kind of detail that investigators who analyze language and behavior in criminal cases pay close attention to. Bounced is a word that describes a specific physical action. Something bounces when it makes contact with a surface and rebounds from it. A ball bounces. An object strikes something solid and departs from it with force. Bouncing implies contact. It implies the surface was present and the object struck it and departed. The word carries within it a physical mechanism, not a loss of balance, not a slip, not a gradual process of falling. Something that bounces has encountered a surface with enough force that the surface sent it back. Fell is a different word entirely. People fall. They lose balance. They misjudge a step. They are caught by a wave. A person who falls from a boat has lost equilibrium and gone over the side. The boat is the context of the fall, not necessarily the surface that propelled the departure. Slipped is another word entirely. Slipping implies traction failure, a foot that found no grip on a wet surface, a handhold that gave way. Brian used none of those words in the recorded call to the Stevensons. He used bounced, and he framed it with specific language that softens without changing the physical description. She basically just bounced off the dinghy. The word basically minimizes the certainty without altering the content. The word just minimizes the significance of the event while retaining the specific physical description. The full phrase, "she basically just bounced off the dinghy," is documented in the public record across multiple verified news organizations. Investigators who analyze statements in criminal and missing persons cases examine language choices specifically because the vocabulary a person selects, particularly in an informal, unguarded setting when they are not aware of being recorded, reflects how their mind is organizing the event they are describing. A word chosen freely in the first hours after an event, in conversation with trusted friends, is as close to unfiltered as language gets. The word bounced applied to a human being entering water from a small boat is not standard vocabulary for shock or grief. It is a specific physical description of a specific physical event, and Brian chose it in his first unguarded account, before any attorney shaped his language, before any formal statement was prepared, before the investigative and legal process began to frame how the incident would be described publicly. Now let us look at what else Brian said in those 40 minutes. Because the word does not exist in isolation, it exists inside a full narrative that Brian gave to the Stevensons. A narrative that, when compared to what he told police and what he told other friends in text messages, contains specific differences that investigators have been examining. In the recorded call, Brian described the sequence of events in considerable detail. He told the Stevensons that he and Lynette had taken the 8-foot hard-bottom dinghy to Tahiti Beach first, then to the Abaco Inn for drinks. Ken, the bartender who served Brian twice that evening and has spoken on record to Fox News Digital and the New York Post, confirmed that he never actually saw Lynette during the 2.5 hours the couple was at the bar. Surveillance footage from the Abaco Inn, reviewed by Carly Ellsworth and her boyfriend Steve, and reported by investigative journalist Ashley Banfield, shows Brian and Lynette leaving the inn at approximately 6:38 p.m., heading toward the dock. Brian told police they left at approximately 7:30 p.m. The surveillance footage and the statement to police are 52 minutes apart. In the call to the Stevensons, Brian described the incident on the water this way. "She basically just bounced off the dinghy in the middle of a little blow, like 20-some knot winds that popped up." A little blow. That is the specific phrase he used, not the unpredictable and extreme conditions he described in his Facebook post. Not the severe weather that would explain why a former United States Marine could not locate his wife in shallow water near a shoreline. A little blow, 20-some knot winds that popped up, and his wife basically just bounced off the boat. He also told the Stevensons that the sun set basically 10 minutes after she fell over. Jim Todd, a volunteer with the Hopetown Fire and Rescue Service who was dining at a restaurant in that area on the evening of April 4th, and who helped bring Brian ashore the following morning, confirmed to Ashley Banfield directly that at 6:38 p.m., There was still complete, unambiguous daylight in those waters, daylight that would remain for another 45 minutes to an hour. The sun did not set in those waters until approximately 7:26 p.m. on April 4, 2026. If the surveillance footage places their departure at 6:38 p.m. and a dinghy crossing takes approximately 15 minutes, the incident would have occurred at approximately 6:53 p.m., more than 30 minutes before sunset. Brian told his friends the sun had set 10 minutes after Lynette went overboard. The documented timeline of sunset in those waters that evening does not support that description. The differences in Brian's various accounts do not end there. In the call to the Stevensons, Brian said that Lynette tried to swim back toward the yacht, which he estimated was approximately 1,000 yards from where the incident occurred. In text messages to his friend Daniel Danforth, reviewed by CBS News, Brian said the wind blew him away from her and she swam toward the sailboat. But according to the account shared by the Royal Bahamas Police Force, Brian told police he last saw his wife swimming toward the shore, not toward the sailboat. Swimming toward the sailboat is one direction. Swimming toward the shore is another. Those two things cannot both be true simultaneously. Brian described the same event, his last visual of Lynette in the water, with two different destinations in two different accounts given to two different audiences. Danforth addressed this when he spoke to CBS News. He said that, in comparing Brian's retelling of Lynette's disappearance with emerging media reports, the stories don't really match up. He specifically noted that Brian's messages reflected Lynette casually swimming back toward the sailboat, while police said Brian recalled his wife being swept overboard and out to sea. Danforth also raised a question about the phones, noting that the Hookers always had their phones with them, frequently posting videos online. And he wondered why Brian's phone did not work, or why they did not have their phones in the boat the night Lynette went missing. The detail about the phones deserves specific attention because it has not been analyzed as thoroughly as the word bounced, and it connects to a category of evidence that is now actively in the hands of investigators. Daniel Danforth, who reviewed Brian's text messages and spoke to CBS News, noted something that seems small but has significant forensic implications. He observed that the Hookers always had their phones with them. They documented their life at sea constantly, posting videos, sharing photographs, maintaining their social media presence as the sailing Hookers. Their phones were part of their daily life on the water in a way that was well documented and publicly visible. And yet, by Brian's account, the phones were not available in the way that would have been expected during the emergency. Danforth's observation, "Why didn't they have their phones in the boat that night?" is not a casual detail. It connects directly to a specific piece of evidence that has been confirmed by authorities. A U.S. Coast Guard officer confirmed in a direct phone call to Lynette's mother, Darlene, that Apple Watch data from devices recovered from the Soulmate is being analyzed. That confirmation was reported through verified outlets. The significance of that specific type of data has been noted in prior coverage of this case. But what has not been fully explored publicly is what the phone data itself, separate from the watch data, might contain. Modern smartphones log location data continuously in the background. They record which cell towers they connected to and when. They log the movement patterns of the device in ways that do not require any active use. Simply being powered on and in a pocket is enough to generate a location record that investigators with the appropriate legal authority can access and analyze. A phone that was on the Soulmate at a specific time creates a location record. A phone that was taken to shore at a specific time creates a different record. A phone that was powered off or that stopped generating location data at a specific moment creates a record of that cessation. The devices seized from the Soulmate under the search warrant reviewed by CBS News included cell phone-related equipment described as material evidence related to a missing person causing bodily harm. That warrant language is not standard language for a routine search of a vessel in connection with an accidental drowning. It is language that reflects a specific investigative conclusion about the nature of what investigators believe occurred, and it was applied to the devices on that boat within days of Lynette's disappearance. The phone data is part of what investigators are working through. The watch data is part of what investigators are working through. The recording is part of what investigators hold. And all of it together, the word bounced, the cascade of failures, the 52-minute gap in the departure timeline, the green cover-up that was never mentioned to search teams, The 4 miles that took 8 to 10 hours in conditions described by a neighboring boat captain as not that bad. All of it exists in the same documented record that this investigation is building toward a conclusion from. Now return to the recording. Because beyond the word bounced, Brian said something else in those 40 minutes that has been reported by CNN, NBC News, CBS News, and Fox News across verified reports of the recording's content. He said, "It was a cascade of failures, and I am never going to forgive myself for it. A cascade of failures." That specific phrase deserves the same analytical attention as the word bounced. A cascade of failures is not the language of shock. It is not the vocabulary of grief. It is a conceptual framework for understanding a sequence of individual errors that compound into a catastrophic outcome. It is the language of after-action review, the process of systematically analyzing what went wrong and at which specific point each failure occurred. It is how someone trained to think in operational terms describes a situation where multiple things went wrong in sequence. Brian Hooker served in the United States Marine Corps. He was trained to conduct after-action analysis. He was trained to understand how individual errors combine into catastrophic outcomes. And in his first unguarded, unmonitored description of the night his wife disappeared, speaking freely to friends, unaware of being recorded, he reached for exactly that framework. Not the vocabulary of a husband shattered by sudden unforeseeable loss. The vocabulary of a man analyzing what happened. The recording also captures Brian saying that he was yelling for her the whole time, that he saw several boats come by and used his phone flashlight and flares to get their attention, but they did not see him, that he threw the anchor, and by the time he got it set, he was about a quarter to half a mile away from her. A quarter to a half mile is between 400 and 800 meters. Jim Todd estimated the incident location at approximately 150 yards from shore. Ken the bartender told Fox News Digital that the entire distance from the incident area to Marsh Harbor, where Brian arrived at approximately 4 in the morning on April 5th, was only 4 miles. 4 miles, 7 to 8 hours. In conditions that Captain Bill, the licensed boat captain anchored directly beside the soulmate that night, described publicly as not that bad. What the recording now permanently places in the documented public record is not just one word or one phrase. It is 40 minutes of Brian Hooker speaking freely to people he trusted, giving an account of what happened on the water on the evening of April 4th, 2026, an account that in multiple specific details does not align with what the surveillance footage shows, what the documented timeline of sunset in those waters establishes, or what he told police about the direction Lynette was swimming when he last saw her. There is one more element of Brian's account in the recorded call that deserves direct attention before we move toward the closing analysis, and it concerns the anchor. Brian told the Stevensons that he threw the anchor, that he anchored the dinghy, that by the time he got the anchor set, he was about a quarter to half a mile away from where Lynette was in the water. Jim Todd, the Hopetown fire and rescue volunteer who spent hours with Brian on the morning of April 5th, and who stood on the bow of the rescue vessel with him for approximately 10 minutes, trying to establish where the incident occurred, addressed the anchor question when speaking to Ashley Banfield. His analysis was direct. He said that absent intoxication, and Ken the bartender's own assessment of Brian's condition when he left the Abaco Inn was sober and functional. The instinctive, automatic response of any person on a small boat when someone goes overboard in shallow water near a shoreline is to throw the anchor immediately. You do not drift. You hold your position. You do not allow the boat to carry you away from the person in the water. Brian's account to the Stevensons describes throwing the anchor after the fact, after he was already a quarter to half a mile away. That specific detail in the recording places the anchor deployment well after the point at which Jim Todd's experience says it would have been deployed by someone whose instinctive priority was holding position to help the person in the water. Jim also raised the second life jacket. There were 2 life jackets in the bottom of that dinghy. Brian says he threw the green float, a seat cushion, toward Lynette. But there was a second life jacket. You pick it up and throw it like a discus to get distance and get it closer to the person in the water. Or you put one on and go over the side yourself. 150 yards from shore. A former United States Marine. You swim to her. You get her to the shallows. You worry about the dinghy tomorrow. In the recorded call, Brian describes a sequence of actions that, When examined against Jim Todd's direct operational experience in those specific waters and the documented conditions at the estimated time of the incident, raises questions that the recording itself does not answer. Brian Hooker denies any wrongdoing. He has not been charged. The investigation is active. The full truth of what happened on the Sea of Abaco on the evening of April 4th, 2026, is what the investigation is working to establish. From the recording, from the devices, from the Apple Watch data, from the cadaver dogs working the water and the shoreline of Elbow Cay. What the recording permanently contributes to that process is the unedited, unguarded first description of that evening from the person who, by his own account, was the last person to see Lynette Hooker alive. 40 minutes, no attorney, no investigators, no awareness that a single word was being captured, and the word he chose for how his wife entered the water was bounced. The investigation holds the recording. CBS News verified it. The investigation also holds the Apple Watch data, confirmed by a U.S. Coast Guard officer in a direct phone call to Lynette's mother Darlene to be part of the analytical picture. The investigation holds the devices seized from the soulmate under a search warrant that CBS News reviewed: a digital video recorder, digital tablets, and cell phone-related equipment described in the warrant as material evidence related to a missing person causing bodily harm. The cadaver dogs that arrived in Hopetown on April 15th are working the water and the shoreline, and what those animals are capable of detecting in surfaces that look clean to the human eye is a forensic capability that is not visible in the public-facing coverage of this search. The Royal Bahamas Police Force Commissioner confirmed to NBC News that Brian Hooker remains a named suspect who has not been cleared and can be rearrested. The U.S. Coast Guard criminal investigation remains open. The Royal Bahamas Police Force investigation remains active. Brian Hooker has denied any wrongdoing completely and categorically. His attorney Terrell Butler stated that Brian Hooker categorically and unequivocally denies all wrongdoing and has been cooperating with relevant authorities. His Michigan-based attorney Crystal Marie Howard told ABC News that Brian Hooker never would have harmed his wife of 25 years. He has not been charged with any crime. All persons referenced in this video are presumed innocent unless charged and convicted in a court of law. Carly Ellsworth flew to the Bahamas to search for her mother. She walked the shorelines where the cadaver dogs were working. She sat on the dock and looked at the soulmate. In January 2026, 3 months before April 4th, Lynette had told Carly something specific, that Brian had threatened to throw her overboard. That account has been confirmed by Carly to CNN and Fox News Digital. A 2015 police report, which exists in public records, documents a previous incident. That report is now part of the investigative record. In 2024, Lynette sent text messages to Marn Stevenson, the same Marn whose husband would record the April 7th call, that CBS News obtained and confirmed. In those messages, Lynette wrote that things had been real bad, that she could not be out there with him. A month later, she went back. She was still at sea with Brian on April 4th, 2026. Darlene Hamlet is 76 years old and waiting in Florida for a phone call that has not come. She told Ashley Banfield, "I just want nothing more than I love you and wish you would have come home." Lynette Hooker called the ocean her happy place. She documented a decade of sunsets and sea turtles on a page called The Sailing Hookers. She was 55 years old, fit and strong, and had been swimming since she was a child. She told her daughter in January 2026 about a threat that used the words overboard. 3 months later, she was in the water, and the man who described that moment to his friends, not knowing a single word was being recorded, not knowing that 40 minutes of unguarded conversation would eventually be verified by CBS News and reported by multiple major news organizations, reached for one specific word to describe how she got there: bounced. All analysis in this video is based on confirmed reporting by CBS News, ABC News, NBC News, Fox News Digital, CNN, News Nation, The Associated Press, and The New York Post. On-record accounts from Ken the bartender, Jim Todd of Hopetown Fire and Rescue, Captain Bill, Daniel Danforth, Blaine and Marn Stevenson, Carly Ellsworth, and Darlene Hamlet have been cited as reported through verified outlets. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. His attorneys state he categorically and unequivocally denies any wrongdoing. All individuals are presumed innocent unless charged and convicted in a court of law. This video is for informational and analytical purposes only. If you have any information related to the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, contact the Royal Bahamas Police Force or the United States Coast Guard. Both investigations remain active. If this investigation moved you, if this kind of serious, source-grounded analysis is what you come here for, subscribe to the Verdict Room right now and hit that notification bell. Every week we examine the evidence, follow the facts, and deliver the verdict. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What does the word bounced tell you? What does a cascade of failures mean coming from a man who served in the Marines and was trained to conduct after-action review? This is the Verdict Room. Lynette Hooker deserves the truth of what happened on the water on the night of April 4th, 2026. The evidence is spoken. Before we close, let us sit with what the full documented picture now looks like. Not as a theory, not as speculation, but as the accumulated weight of what the confirmed public record contains. A photograph time-stamped at 6:34 p.m. shows Lynette in a green cover-up at the pool of the Abaco Inn. Surveillance footage at 6:38 p.m. shows them walking toward the dock. Brian told police they left at 7:30. A 52-minute gap between what the camera recorded and what he told investigators. The green cover-up that is clearly visible in that photograph never appeared in a single description Brian gave to any member of the search team looking for his wife in those waters. Ken, the bartender, who knows those waters from a lifetime of watching boats cross them, said 4 miles should not take 8 to 10 hours, even drifting. Jim Todd, who was in those specific waters that specific evening and helped rescue Brian from shore the following morning, confirmed that 6:38 p.m. was complete daylight with another 45 minutes to an hour of sun remaining. Captain Bill, whose boat was anchored directly beside the Soulmate that night, described the conditions as not that bad. Brian told his friends in a private recorded call that his wife basically just bounced off the dinghy. He described the event as a cascade of failures. He said the sun had set 10 minutes after she went overboard, but the sun did not set in those waters until 7:26 p.m., and the documented timeline places the incident well before that. He told friends she swam toward the sailboat. He told police she swam toward shore. One of those things cannot be true, and in January 2026, 3 months before April 4th, Lynette told her daughter about a threat that used the word overboard. Carly Ellsworth is in the Bahamas looking for her mother. Darlene Hamlet is in Florida waiting for a phone call. The investigation is active across 2 countries, 2 agencies, and multiple simultaneous forensic tracks. The recording exists. The word bounced is in the record. The investigation has everything else. Lynette Hooker deserves the truth. Every word examined honestly. Every account compared carefully. Every documented inconsistency followed completely to its conclusion. The evidence has spoken. One final observation about the Stevensons themselves. Blaine and Marn Stevenson did not want to become part of this story. They were friends of the Hookers. They called because they were concerned. They recorded that call. And Blaine has been transparent about the fact that he recorded it and about his reasons for eventually releasing it. He published it because Brian was detained and could not speak for himself. And Blaine wanted Brian's own account of the events in Brian's own words to be part of the public record. What Blaine could not have anticipated when he decided to release that recording was that the specific word Brian used, bounced, would become one of the most analyzed pieces of language in this entire investigation. That the phrase cascade of failures would be reported by every major news organization that covered the recording. That the account Brian gave freely to friends he trusted would be placed alongside surveillance footage, sunset times, bartender observations, and first responder accounts, and would not align with what those independent sources document. 40 minutes, no lawyers, no investigators, no awareness of being recorded. Just a man talking to friends about the worst night of his life, reaching for the words that his mind produced without editing, without strategy, without the process that shapes formal statements into something legally managed. The words he produced were bounced and cascade of failures. Those words are now in the permanent public record of this case. And when the investigation reaches its conclusion, when the Apple Watch data is fully analyzed, when the devices from the Soulmate have been fully examined, when the cadaver dog operation in Hopetown has run its full course, Those words will be part of the evidentiary picture that the documented record assembled about the evening of April 4th, 2026, on the Sea of Abaco. Lynette Hooker called the ocean her happy place. She deserved to stay there.